Colleagues, it's time for us to start our meeting, and we've also formed a quorum. So let's start today's meeting of the panel on environmental affairs. Item 1 on the agenda, confirmation of minutes. Up to this moment, I have not received any proposed amendment to the minutes of the meeting held on the 2nd of June 2015. So I suggest that the minutes be confirmed. Any objection? No. Confirmed. Item 2 on the agenda. Information papers issued since the last meeting. After the last meeting, 2 papers were issued. The government submitted a paper on report on the Cleaner Production Partnership Program. Another one is the operational account of the sewage treatment services. Any question? Dr. Kenneth Chan? Mr. Chairman, apart from the government's papers, Greenpeace also submitted a paper on ecological damages in California in relation to certain dolphins. I recall that at the beginning of this session, when we discussed with the government the issue, we would like to discuss the endangered species and the implementation of the convention, as well as CAP 568 in May or June this session. For reasons unknown to us, that was postponed. And we're also very concerned about ivory trade. It seems that the government's observations are totally opposite to those of Greenpeace. If our Customs and Excise Department adopts a blind eye policy on ivory trade, it would tarnish our international image. So I hope that through our staff we can have a discussion at the first meeting after the recess. International organizations and green organizations, green groups would like to come to Hong Kong to do publicity and education. And by our discussion, we would like to invite government officials to be more focused and handle Hong Kong's obligations as an international citizen. Perhaps we should have a serious undertaking to the concerned groups. Deputy Chairman, I've heard you. We have to invite the government officials in anyway, so after they've come in, I'll ask them to respond to your remarks. So please invite the officials from the Environment Bureau to come in. Colleagues, in attendance for Agenda Item 3, we have Ms. Christine Low, Undersecretary for the Environment, Mr. Andrew Lai, Deputy Director of Environmental Protection, and Ms. Vivian Wong, Senior Environmental Protection Officer. Undersecretary, before you entered, our Deputy Chairman raised an issue. Originally, we would like to, within this session, discuss CAP 568 in relation to the protection of endangered species. The Deputy Chairman asked why that subject was postponed. In the coming session, can we accord priority to that issue? Can you explain why that was postponed so many times? In fact, I heard members, when I was outside, I heard Dr. Kenneth Chan for ivory trade as well as other endangered species. Together with the with the AFCD, we did have a number of discussions. Well, when we've formed some ideas, it will be more appropriate for us to have an exchange with you. But if members would like to have a discussion in this panel in October, by all means, give us a date. Then we'll be more focused in our internal discussions. So next time when we have an opportunity to have exchanges, our relevant colleagues can come here to have exchanges with you. Undersecretary, this subject matter has been placed on our list of outstanding items. We've actually made arrangements for that issue to be discussed. That had been put on our agenda a number of times already. Next session, if I'm still the chairman and if Dr. Chan is still a deputy chairman, we'll definitely accord priority to that issue. All right, so if the Undersecretary is ready, let's proceed to item 3 on the agenda. Progress report on the Pilot Green Transport Fund. Departmental officials, can you introduce the paper to us, and then members will ask questions. Who will do a briefing? Deputy Director. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This paper is to introduce to you the latest progress report on the Pilot Green Transport Fund. The fund was set up in March 2011 with $300 million as the startup fund to support the transport study or non-commercial or non-profit-making bodies to try out new transport technologies for land transport or marine vessels. As for its scope, is rather comprehensive. In the past 4 years, we granted 92 experimental projects covering electric taxis, electric light buses, electric goods vehicles, hybrid goods vehicles, and hybrid light buses. We also approved certain projects to support ferry companies to have more environmentally friendly engines. We also assisted bus companies to introduce more energy-saving engines, but the last 2 had not started yet. As for the operation of the fund, for the recipients of funds, within the 2-year experimental period, they will be subject to follow-up work on the part of our colleagues, and then 6 months after the start of the project, we'll have an interim report, and in a year's time, there will be another report, and in 2 years' time, there will be a final report, in the hope that we can collect data on the subsidized mode of transport in relation to operational satisfaction, how much fuel can be saved for drivers, do they have special difficulties, and so forth. After collecting all these experience, we would like to compile a report which will be uploaded to the webpage of the fund for those who are interested in the transport trade to peruse, such that next time when they want to procure vehicles or transport products, that will serve as a good reference. This fund will continue to operate. Well, there are restrictions to funding. For example, for the same applicant, the ceiling is $12 million only. But up to this moment, nobody has exhausted that ceiling. So these criteria is to ensure equal opportunity of participation and to ensure the government plays an appropriate role. Questions are welcome.
Members, if you'd like to ask questions, please raise your hands. We have 6. So each will have 4 minutes. Mr. Wai Kwok. Thank you. I was once a member of the steering committee of the Green Transport Fund, although I'm not an incumbent member now, and I have some understanding of the operation of the fund. Recently, the taxi trade, or representatives of the taxi trade have contacted me, and we had a meeting with them together with members of the BPA. They're concerned about taxis, vehicles that are not licensed, but they can be called online, and they were concerned about the impact on their business. Another point they raised was the choice of taxis. I think the trade has a lot of views on this. For LPG taxis, of course, they are much cleaner, but because of a lack of LPG refilling stations, their business have been affected. We see in LPG refilling stations that usually the period before change of shift is their peak time, and taxi drivers have to spend much of their precious business time queuing up for refilling. So they would like to ensure that there is proper supporting facilities for LPG taxis, and they also want more. They want different types of green taxis. The Green Transport Fund can do this. In fact, the taxi trade has got representatives sitting on the fund or the steering committee of the fund as well. However, they don't think that there are many different types of green taxis available. And I give the floor to the administration to tell us the type of green taxis available and whether there will be more choices for taxi operators in the future. They know that overseas there are diesel taxis that are very green too, because technology is not like what it was. Even diesel taxis can be very clean and very friendly to the environment. So can the administration please respond to this? Deputy Director. Thank you, Mr. Low, for your questions. The fund has supported trials of electric taxis. We have approved applications involving 8 electric taxis, 3 of which are already on trial. The longest one has been on trial for more than a year. Electric taxis pose challenges to the trade. As we know, the industry may operate, or a taxi may operate around the clock, and therefore the demand for recharging is high. And if you may refer to Annex F, you have alternative fuel commercial vehicle models type approved by the TD. We've only approved 1 electric taxi in Hong Kong, is manufactured on the mainland. So there is a very limited choice to the trade. Perhaps will fail to meet their needs. Next round, please. Mr. Wu Chi-wai. Thank you, Chairman. I have 2 points. I think there are different models type available in the market when it comes to electrical vehicles. Can the administration explain to us how come for electric taxis you have only approved 1 model type? What about electric vehicles already available in the market? Why can't they be used as taxis? And according to the preliminary report, the biggest problem is still the availability of recharging points. According to the report, there will be extended charging points available. But I think the speed of recharging cannot catch up with, cannot meet the demand of the industry. Now, will you, as a matter of policy, promote the use of electric vehicles, and in all shopping malls, you provide high-speed recharging points for electric vehicles so as to overcome the technical difficulties involved? Thank you, Mr. Wu, for your questions. If you may refer to Annex F of the paper, we have got different models type approved by the TD here. The TD welcomes electric vehicle manufacturers all over the world to introduce their products into Hong Kong. We welcome different models and different types. Whether a manufacturer is interested in joining our market, it is their own decision. But for light goods vehicle and buses, it's true that we have approved more models type. And therefore, the industry has been more enthusiastic in trying out new models. But for taxis, well, they may have to run 400 kilometers per day. Can any electric vehicle live up to such a high demand? We have no objection to any electric vehicle applying to become taxis if they can fulfill the requirements. But whether the vehicle is suitable for such a use, it would depend on the manufacturer. We will will sponsor the purchase of electric vehicles. We also sponsor the installation of charging points. They may have to do so at home or even at their place of work. So charging is not really a problem. We ensure that they have appropriate places for installing the charging points, and if they can fulfill these requirements, we will approve the application. But for most of the cases, well, if an ordinary or medium speed charging point is sufficient, we may not approve the installation of high speed charging points. But for medium speed charging points, it may take a few hours for charging to complete, and this may be an obstacle to the use of electric vehicles. Will you, as a matter of policy, provide charging points at different places so that it is a kind of infrastructure, basic infrastructure for electric vehicles? Ms. Low. Now, if you're talking about taxis, it may not be that easy for taxis because, as we all know, high-speed charging may damage the functions. So whether it be a private vehicle or other kinds of vehicles, you should not always use high-speed recharging. It may be used when you are really pressed for time, but if we use a medium speed and ordinary speed, it will not do so much harm to the vehicles. We will try to suit the mode of operation of taxis as far as possible. As the Deputy Director said, the distribution of recharging points, the price of the vehicle, and also the parking fees during charging, all these are factors being considered by the taxi industry. So I agree with the Deputy Director that the technology is not advanced enough to support the operation of electric taxis yet, because taxis have to run over 400 kilometers per day. I think the industry is very concerned about taxi apps, and during the recess I will discuss with the industry this point. I hope the administration can consider approving diesel taxis that can suit Euro standards, and so that they can be luxury type taxis. And according to the administration, even Euro diesel emission standards are inferior to LPG taxi emissions. But what about the use of biodiesel? The emissions can be further improved. in the emission of nitrogen oxides, will such vehicles perform better. Of course, they may not be able to meet LPG standards, but all over the world, taxis are fueled by biodiesel, and if you do not relax the rules, I'm afraid we cannot have luxury taxis in Hong Kong, and you have created a big obstacle for them. So will you approve Euro biodiesel vehicles? Can you consider relaxing the emission standards? Deputy Director. Thank you, Mr. Yik, for your suggestion. For commercial vehicles, we really have a reservation when it comes to the use of diesel as fuel, because the emission of RSP is higher, and WHO has already confirmed that RSP is carcinogenic, and therefore for commercial diesel vehicles, we launched a major sponsorship program so that they can be phased out by 2020. This is because of a major public health concern. When it comes to taxis, they are just like other commercial vehicles. They have a high mileage and they run all over the territory. If the supplier cannot convince us that the diesel taxi or taxi vehicle will not pose the same health risk as their counterparts, then for the sake of public health, we will encourage organizations to use more environmental friendly vehicles such as electrical hybrid vehicles. This is all because this is out of consideration for public health. Mr. Yik, I'm asking the Deputy Director whether they're going to conduct a research study. The use of Euro diesel engine and the fuel is biodiesel. Can you do a comparison with LPG? Because the data you have is a comparison between diesel and LPG. Have you considered doing a study with biodiesel, and if the emissions are much lower than that of diesel, will you consider relaxing the rules? Well, if the taxi industry is interested in doing this research, we can discuss. Professor Chen, according to the paper, a pilot green transport fund has been set up, and the steering committee is chaired by Professor Timothy Tong, president of the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. And we've also got annexes to tell us the progress. And Peritan, as the industry has reservations, and I think the administration is actually saying that the effectiveness of the fund is not very desirable.
We must find technologies, green transport technologies, as well as R&D products which suit Hong Kong's road conditions and environment. Well, previously we got a product which was very good. I don't know for what reasons they shifted to other markets instead of continuing to develop their markets in Hong Kong. Well, I think that's a very successful experience in Hong Kong. I don't know why it had ended out of no reasons or unknown reasons. In fact, beyond the steering committee, there's another high-level steering committee chaired by the financial secretary. That steering committee is on the use of electric vehicles. In terms of policies and directions, that steering committee only convene twice a year in CGO. It seems that the FS was doing something routine only. And now we have the ceiling of $12 million. Apparently, they're not serious enough. Undersecretary, now we have this fund to encourage people to make use of it, and there's another steering committee chaired by the FS. In fact, we would like to encourage the use of newer models of vehicles. Well, our concepts and ideas are good, but at the operational level, you must encourage operators to use the new models. Now, there are certain phenomena. In the past 1 odd years, we suddenly saw an upsurge of electric vehicles. Why? Because there are more models, more types of electric vehicles entering Hong Kong, so the purchasers had more choices. And for electric private cars, they're expensive in price, but because of more choices, prices had been lowered slightly. And then we now have more recharging points. So in that respect, Hong Kong is comparable to many European cities. And all along, our emphasis was on public vehicles, because most of our people make use of public transport, so taxis, goods vehicles, LGVs, etc. How many vehicular types there are? Do they work? Now the operators are concerned about all these. Yesterday I talked to my colleagues, and then in NXT you can see 14 institutions who have actually used electric vehicles or hybrid vehicles. Have they made a decision to procure the same types of vehicles when the next replacement comes? Well, the feedback is that for the time being, the situation is not clear enough. I think we should encourage more local R&D projects on electric vehicles. That's very important. Together with Ferrari of Italy, they produced this green transport product. There's no reason why we should not invite them back. Mr. Potter, Mr. Chairman, for any fund, any project, we would like to see effect. Science and technology are ever advancing. But then for fuel subsidy is $3 million per vehicle and $9 million per application. Quite some money there. So where should we make use of these subsidies to assist transport companies in the use of green vehicles? Apparently, they have more commercial considerations rather than considering government subsidy. Well, are they subject to certain conditions? For example, do they have to make an undertaking that after some years they have to shift to these vehicles? Otherwise, they may just be playing, so to speak, with these pilot vehicles. So for the importers, should we create a local environment to try out these vehicles first? In fact, green vehicles suit the whole world. So why should we allow them to carry out an experiment first? Are there any benchmarks to assess the effectiveness of this fund and the projects? And then apart from offering a subsidy, did the government itself join these experiments? Who will answer this? Deputy Director. I'd like to thank Mr. Potter for his question. Why did we set up this fund to promote and subsidize non-commercial and non-profit-making institutions to try out these products? There are 2 points here. I agree with Mr. Dare that these are commercial activities. If they want to try electric vehicles, they should use their own money to do so. So why should we assist non-commercial and non-profit-making bodies to use these vehicles? Now, these vehicles are still in an experimental stage. They're not mature yet. So technically, in terms of functions and efficacy, the operators may have doubts. So if the government can help them out, then the motivation for trying out these vehicles will be bigger. Secondly, cost is a concern. For the buses or PLBs or coaches, if a 50-seater coach costs $1 million, for an electric coach is $3 million. So, in terms of cost, nobody would like to try electric coaches. But for the sake of zero emission and better living environment and a better environment, we would like to see more users. So the manufacturers should adopt policies to attract people to buy those vehicles. And if there are no economic benefits after trying out the vehicles, they will just drop the vehicles. So it's just like playing with a toy. Well, if more and more people, commercial or non-profit making bodies are making use of electric vehicles or hybrid vehicles, that will be very happy and encouraging to us. Now, for this fund, some applicants, after finishing an experiment, apply for further subsidies for further experiments. Oh, of course, you offer them benefits, so they're willing to try and try and try. Well, it seems that the Undersecretary is saying that after the experiments, people did not quite want to use electric vehicles. Well, we can have discussion with the first 14 companies because they basically completed their projects already. Well, they're for commercial uses, so they'll look at a lot of things. For example, how much fuel has been saved. Now, we can see all these from their reports. Should we not wait for another period of time, maybe not too long, to allow these companies to use the vehicles for some time and such that users in Hong Kong know the information, then sales may speed up. Now, for the hybrid vehicles, they are cheaper than electric vehicles, but still, the price of hybrid vehicles is a third more expensive than ordinary vehicles. The honorable member said that the manufacturers should spend resources on promotion, but then they won't hugely cut prices. So government behavior is very important. Number one, does the government buy the vehicles? Does the government test the vehicles? Secondly, if there's a subsidy, you can speed up people's knowledge about these vehicles. Next, Mr. Chan Kim Paul. Mr. Chairman, may I refer to paragraph 4 of the paper? Now, $300 million for the fund, 92 projects approved. I won't repeat, electric taxis, electric light buses, etc. And the total subsidy level at the moment is about $96 million. Will the government review the subsidy level, for example, by lifting the ceiling? Can you increase the $12 million to enhance attractiveness, for example? And for transport operators, they are subject to assessment, and a report has to be submitted to the government in 6 months' time. With the 92 approved projects, you give us a summary in Annex E. Do you have more information for us on efficacy? For example, how much greenhouse gases had been reduced? In what way was emission reduced? Were there any special incidents in which you found the technologies very useful? Can you give us more information? Deputy Director, thank you, Mr. Chen Kim-po, for your question. Concerning subsidy, the subsidy for electric vehicles can be up to half of the vehicle price. Many companies were of the view that this subsidy can subsidize the price difference between conventional cars and electric cars. But of course, they have to strike a balance. As Mr. Dare said, should we just give out electric vehicles as gifts, for example? Of course not. Now, we do it by way of 50-50 sharing. That is, the government and the operator each pays half. I think that's an appropriate arrangement. And now we have the consolidated results for the projects approved in the annexes. The experimental period for each electric vehicle is 2 years. So in 6 months' time, a year's time, and 2 years' time, reports are to be submitted to us. And all those reports have been uploaded to the EPD's webpage for public reference. Up to this moment, we have no intention to, as suggested by Mr. Chan, publish information on how much fuel has been saved, to what extent has carbon emission been reduced, because we're talking about a small number of vehicles, just dozens of them. So data and statistics are rather scarce. I mean, you can draw comparisons. That is, for each vehicle, how much emission can be reduced. Then Hong Kong people will see the future picture. That is, what merits will there be for Hong Kong? Well, I see your point. We have just started with the first round of reports. The first round of reports just came in. Well, apart from these projects, companies were very concerned about CSRs as well as carbon emission. So in future, it may be possible for us to calculate the extent of reduction. Solar energy seems to apply to air conditioners only. Can you extend its coverage? Because throughout the whole world, they're developing solar energy, which should be most effective and efficient. Deputy Director, we now focus on electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles. But if car suppliers tell us that they have produced a solar car that's suitable, we are very willing to try it out. Mr. To, well, obligations come with privileges. Well, I heard the Deputy Director say that they would like to create a critical mass, that is to have more users. Yes, there should be economic incentives, but at the same time you should legislate for regulation. So do you have a timetable for legislating on carbon emission? Well, otherwise, as Mr. Paul Jie said, they will continue to apply for subsidies. Well, I think for them, the best situation is that you subsidize their whole vehicular fleet,
so that they can both save fuel and the capital cost. But if you continue to subsidize them, then what's the point? And I have seen, I see here that ferry companies have also applied. I think this is good, because emissions from vehicles, from ferries, are rather significant. I think for projects under preparation, Star Ferry is also applying for a subsidy. But there is more than one ferry company in Hong Kong. Has the administration taken the initiative to approach other ferry vehicles, including Kaitos, because emissions from ferries are even more serious than vehicles? Deputy Director, thank you, Mr. To, for your two questions. First, on legislate to regulate. Yes, we do want to do it, but we have to wait until the situation is mature. Take LPG taxis as example. When there was mature technology to replace diesel taxis, we made a major move in the year 2000. We launched LPG replacement exercise, and we announced that no diesel taxis could have their licenses renewed. And take private vehicles as an example. When the emission standards have advanced from Euro 5 to Euro 6, we will certainly legislate when the situation is ripe. And if for electric vehicles, if technology is mature, we will also do the same. We will legislate to regulate that. And for ferries, well, we welcome road and sea public transport operators to apply for the fund. We have given them briefings, but if you look at the outcome, I think road public transport operators are more interested in the scheme. And for ferries, well, we have not excluded them. We have given them briefings as well. So the Star Ferry only, it took a long time for the Star Ferry to wait until the technology was suitable. So there must be the right technology, and the operator has to have the intention before subsidy can be given. I think it is acceptable that we provide a subsidy for trying out new technologies, and it's also Electrical's position. Otherwise, we will not have approved funding for that. And according to the deputy director, the technology was not mature, but we have many hybrid vehicles available. So is it your position that the technology is not yet mature enough for you to legislate to require that? Now, many people have the impression that there are many hybrid vehicles running on the roads, and why don't we legislate to mandate the replacement? Perhaps the situation is not as simple as that. The technology in private vehicles may be very different when it comes to other types of vehicles. And according to the DD, you must convince the trade that a certain new vehicle can perform the functions they require before they're willing to switch to a new type of vehicles. For light goods vehicles and buses, so on and so forth, there are not enough choices. Now, if you say that it is too expensive, it doesn't matter. We can require it, and perhaps everyone pay a higher cost. But the problem is there isn't enough choice available. I will now use my own 4 minutes. I'm a bit disappointed from the point of cost effectiveness. You have subsidized 92 projects, and the first 14 projects have been completed. And according to the administration, not too many operators are willing to purchase electric vehicles. So this fund is like an ATM machine. When people want to buy new vehicles, they can apply for subsidy under the fund when they don't really want to spend their own money to buy such vehicles. I think this reflects that the administration is not determined enough. For other countries, including our own country, Beijing, they have a timetable to require all vehicles to have zero emissions. But we haven't seen the same in Hong Kong. Now, for taxis, since the fund is available, I can apply for $100,000 or so to buy a new car to play with, and bus companies will also do the same. You don't have to determination to achieve the policy objective. Now, if the 300 million in the fund is exhausted, you may apply for another 300 million next year and another 300 million the year after next. If you do not have enough determination, then you will not be able to achieve your final objective. Can you explain? And for ferries, there is only one application from a ferry company among the 92. Is it true that the subsidy for the amount is relatively too small for ferries, because we may spend $100,000 or $200,000 to buy a new car, but for a ferry, even $2 million, $3 million would not be enough for the replacement of an engine? Is it because the amount of subsidy is too low for ferries? In fact, the last government already had this long-term objective, and that is all public buses in the long term should have zero emission. And how can we achieve this objective? There must be a manufacturer who produces a double-decker that can be used in Hong Kong. For single-deckers, it's easier. We have some on trial in Hong Kong, but for the time being, we don't really have a double-decker. And for hybrid buses, there are 6 in Hong Kong, and you've heard of other models coming on stream. For bus companies, they have their own idea as to the type of models that can suit their mode of operation better, and these buses are in the pipeline. So it's not that we don't have the determination, rather the question is when bus companies can replace en masse such vehicles. Well, of course, I'm asking for a target date. Of course, I know that ultimately all buses may have zero emissions. But if you look at the buses in Beijing and in other places, well, not all their buses are double-deckers, but still they have a target date for replacing their buses so that they can have zero emissions. How come we don't have a similar date in Hong Kong? Well, I don't know how to put it to you, but I'll try. I've been to Europe recently, and I have observed this phenomenon. There are cities who, even according to the experts, made political decisions. That is, by a certain date, they must procure hybrid buses. The administrators are trying out different types of models very anxiously, because they know the target date for buying these buses. They are still trying out the technology, and yet the decision, the political decision is already made. You may call us conservative. Now, we're willing to sponsor bus companies to try different models. So we do it the other way round. You may say that we are different, but I think the steps are similar. What about the amount of subsidy? Is it enough from ferries' point of view? Now, if you look at Annex B, we have the rules. Vehicle subsidy per vehicle, $3 million per vehicle and $9 million per application. We can imagine the alteration cost for a ferry to have a clean engine. Yes, it is more expensive. So for the application from that ferry company, we have given them an amount up to our cap. In fact, Hong Kong is a vehicle user city and not the manufacturer. So when it comes to choice, we are really in a more passive position. This is very different from EU because they have different guidelines. Once the guidelines are promulgated, the manufacturers would produce vehicles according to the guidelines. they will develop new vehicles according to the new guidelines. For the Pilot Green Transport Fund, I think it has played a positive role. It has pushed the industry to find out vehicles that they think might be suitable, so they can apply under the fund. They can't just play with the new vehicle, they have to submit reports. So I think from this perspective, the fund is positive. However, the government should take the initiative to conduct its own research. For instance, the taxi trade is saying that there are green diesel vehicles available. How come they can't be considered? I think it should be for the administration to face up to their demand. Yes, the administration has told us possible difficulties. I don't think we need to speculate. We should just carry out relevant tests and studies. So I think we can adopt a two-pronged approach. We encourage the trade to choose vehicles they want to try out, and on the other hand, the administration should be proactive and initiate research studies. Can that be done? Under Secretary, I think I get Mr. Lowe's point. We will see whether we have projects considered worthwhile by both parties, and we'll try it out. All right, we end this item here. Next, promoting green procurement. For this item, again, we have Ms. Christine Low, Under Secretary for the Environment, Mr. Howard Chen, Deputy Director of Environmental Protection, and Mr. Wong Hon Men, Assistant Director from the same department. I'll give the floor to the administration for a presentation, and members would like to ask questions. A show of hands, please. We have a PowerPoint presentation from the administration. Mr. Wong Hon-ming, will you please give us a simple briefing? I'm sure we've all got the papers. So please be succinct, Mr. Wong. Yes, I'll try to do so. In 2009, we wanted Hong Kong to be a green city. In response, we've done a lot, and among them, we have reviewed our green procurement policies. In the past, we had 27 items on the list, and in 2011, the number has been added to 103, and we have set out a framework and encouraging government departments to engage in green promotion. So in 2011, we had 103 items, a big jump from 27 in 2000. Last year, we reviewed the items, and our latest list has got 150 items. So we have added 6 new categories. On the bottom layer, we have the new items: agriculture and horticulture, distilled water, green stores and green services, packaging materials, so on and so forth. So from 103, the list has been expanded to 150. We have construction and building supplies and daily items such as agriculture and horticulture and procurement and hiring of vehicles, so on and so forth. So we have adopted a scientific approach in drawing up the list, and it's also suitable for a large-scale procurement.
Okay.
To facilitate our frontline staff members, for small amount purchase, we would like to adopt the same green specifications. So this time, we propose that for purchases not exceeding $50,000 per order, there will be certain principles. There are 3 basic principles: energy efficiency, use of water efficiency, international labeling certification schemes. We also took reference from the statements and declarations produced by the manufacturers and suppliers. It's just like the amount of sugar and salt set out in the labels, which must satisfy commodity descriptions. We also developed a new information portal to facilitate our colleagues to refer to the information concerned. And we also introduced a wide range of information for our colleagues to make use of such green information for larger procurements. And we hope that such useful information can be made available to the trades and industries and members of the public. So for this portal, apart from green specifications for procurement, we also have international labeling schemes and examples on the portal. We also offer training to our civil service colleagues to enhance their knowledge of the portal. And then the government logistics department collaborate with us to publicize to suppliers for the introduction of green materials to Hong Kong. So we do publicity with suppliers, environmental organizations, and trade associations. Let me give you some figures. In 2013, for government purchases of the 103 items with green specifications, the sale totaled $1.041 billion. In 2014, we will increase 103 items to 150 items. So the sum of money will grow. Apart from these green specifications, we also promote the wider use of certain biomaterials. I'll first talk about biodiesel. Many government operations can use biodiesel. Conventional diesel plus biodiesel will generate what we call B5 diesel. We had a number of agreements on this. In 2012, we had a pilot scheme with a 16-month experiment using 3.5 million metric tons of B5 diesel, and then further increased to 8.5 million metric tons. The first contract had been completed and will tender for the next contract that will last for 3 years. After discussing with relevant departments, we saw that demands had grown, and in the next 3-year contract, 17 million metric tons of the B5 diesel would be consumed. And then for public works projects, we also encourage contractors to use biodiesel. Last year, over 120,000 metric tons of B5 diesel had been used. For the first contract, every year is around 2.6 million metric tons. Second contract, a rise of 54%, and the third contract, 5.7 million metric tons. Second contract, 4 million tons. So apart from the biodiesel that I mentioned, we also expand our green procurements. For example, tiles, electric vehicles, eco-pavers, low-emission on-road mobile machineries, as well as reclaimed asphalt pavement. So all parties concerned are spending effort on this. For eco-pavers, in 2014, we absorbed 35 million metric tons of such tiles, covering over 170,000 square meters of road surface. So internally in the government, we had promoted green procurement and tried as far as possible used green materials and recycled materials. So much for my introduction for the time being, Mr. Chairman. All right, question time for members. 4 minutes per member. Mr. Porter. We are very pleased to see the result that the government had spent a great deal of effort on procuring green materials. Well, let me go back to your records. I don't know the total amount used, but all departments in total, what's the percentage? Do you have the percentage? You said that for all categories, it's up to 82%. So what about biodiesel? What's the percentage point? How far is it from the 82%? Why can't more departments use biodiesel? Well, the number grew from 7 to 11. Why can't you use B5 diesel more extensively? Because $300 million had been spent on the Pilot Green Transport Fund, which we just discussed. Now, waste cooking oil can be turned into usable fuel. So why can't more departments use B5 diesel? Deputy Director, maybe I should say something about promotion and Mr. Wong can say something about the percentage. For biodiesel used by government departments, from the process you can see that from 2012 up to now, in just 3 years, many government departments are already using biodiesel. Well, not every government department uses diesel. For those departments that use diesel, they may not have their own diesel filling stations. Some departments have private cars which will use private filling stations. Some departments have the equipment and devices which are not suitable for biodiesel. For example, for the more sophisticated equipment, it may not be appropriate to use biodiesel. So we do it by way of promotion. For those departments that can use biodiesel, those equipment that can use biodiesel, we encourage them to use biodiesel. As for percentage, I'll defer to Mr. Wong. Yes, Assistant Director. Last year, the government spent around 40 million liters. That will grow to 17 million. So, totaling 5.7 million, around 15%. After midway for the 3-year contract, we would like to boost consumption. So we believe the percentage will continue to grow. Mr. Jie, 500 divided by 4,000, so the percentage is very low. We heard that not all equipment suits biodiesel. Are there any other reasons for not using B5 diesel? Well, I'm not saying that no equipment suits B5 diesel. Some departments are actually trying it out. They will examine whether or not biodiesel will affect the functions of their machines and equipment. Take, for example, the emergency vehicles. They won't shift to biodiesel immediately. They would like to try it out first. So in the process, we would like departments to use biodiesel as far as possible. Mr. Tony Tse, Mr. Chairman, of course, I support green procurement. Yet, insofar as the government is concerned, there may be other considerations. What about competitiveness? What about price? How much weighting would you put on this? If your policy is lopsided towards this, what will happen? I understand that the government is a big customer. So if the government can adopt a green procurement policy, it will be able to help the manufacturer. Eco-pavers is an example. Just now it's mentioned that if government policy is to procure electric vehicles, then all government vehicles will have to be electric vehicles. Of course, I understand that you conduct value for money audit. So how much money are you willing to pay? There may be other types of green electric vehicles. So I'd like to have more information from the government. All right, so much for the government. What about private enterprises? If the direction also suits private enterprises, then you'll be able to promote such products more. So I'd like to know whether other work are being done. Deputy Director, the broad principle is that if supply is adequate in the market, we'll set requirements for such procurement. But if there's inadequate supply in the market, then we'll only adopt an experimental and encouraging approach. So in the initial stage, such green products will be more expensive than ordinary products. Anyway, the government must take the lead. So we have to obtain consent from government departments. Sometimes green products are more expensive, but government departments are still willing to use them. As Mr. Zhe pointed out, for eco-pavers or green glass materials, in the initial stage of the experiment, they may be more expensive, but they only account for a small percentage of the overall operational costs, so they're willing to try. For biodiesel, we've been using B5 diesel. Its price is very similar to that of ordinary diesel, depending on the quantity you use and market supply. As for private enterprises, as Mr. Wong explained, apart from encouraging government departments internally to use green procurement, we also do promotion in the private sector. That's why we updated our web page, our portal. We're facing private enterprises and public bodies in the hope that they'll also adopt green procurement. In future, we'll organize more seminars and promotional sessions to introduce to private enterprises government's experience in green procurement in relation to biodiesel, eco-pavers, etc. So we'd like to do promotion. Another promotion approach is that through contractors for public works projects, we would like to encourage suppliers to use more green products. Next, Mr. To. Well, the government takes the lead to do green procurement. I think there are three effects here. First of all, product manufacturers can survive. Second, by boosting supply, you can lower prices. Third, you can reduce the use of landfills. However, the general impression of the public is that it's more expensive to use green products. Paper is one example. Recycled paper is 2 to 3 times more expensive than ordinary paper. Have you ever assessed how green procurement can lower prices?
Secondly, apart from the government, the best is to encourage the private sector, including domestic households, to adopt green procurement as well. So how can you tell the community that although prices are higher, we can save that much land or capacity in our landfills? And even for electrical vehicles, we can also save fuel. So for government buildings, even if they spend more capital investment in green installations, they can recover the cost in 7 years by saving electricity tariff. So while you encourage people to adopt green procurement, you should also in the long term tell them how much space in our landfills can be saved and the amount of electricity tariff that can be saved. You should tell the community the long-term benefits. Thank you for your suggestion, Ms. Sitho. The whole objective of green procurement is to promote green products and to publicize the benefits of green products. We have got such information in our webpage, and we've also organized briefings. And we've included this in our information, but of course we can step up on this front. We have 150 items on our procurement list. The quantity of the government's procurement may not account for a big market share, but if Ms. Sitho is interested, we can provide some information. For biodiesel, as an example, since we've been using local waste cooking oil, we've seen cheaper prices as a result of increased procurement by the government. Ms. Sitho? Locally, we have grassroots recyclers. They are producing soap, recycled soap and cleansing agents. So when you procure such products, please do not just look at large producers or suppliers. You should also try to assist these small recyclers or organizations to survive. I have a suggestion, Chairman. We have 150 items on the list. It can be available on our website, and I think even LegCo can consider using the list. We have a lot of useful information on the web page, and I think it will be the most comprehensive database available in Hong Kong when it comes to green procurement. The Deputy Director said that we have to promote this to the private sector as well, because we also want them to make use of our information in making procurement decisions. Perhaps LegCo can consider making reference to our procurement list. Yes, we want the government to provide us this bit of information. When we pay more for green products, where can we recover the extra cost? In particular, the government is cutting our funding. So I think we are doing our very best in making savings. Dr. Low? Of course, we will support green procurement. But I think EPD is the only department enthusiastically promoting this. I do not see any similar attitude from other departments. Recently, we were considering the replacement of the lighting system in subway involving the Kai-Tak Development Center. We're told that B5 will be used. T5, many years ago, it could be considered a greener type of fluorescent tube, but if nowadays we still use T5 tube, it's a bit outdated. For LED street lights, I think they are being adopted all over the world. Why are we so conservative? I will not blame our Public Works Department colleagues, because they are doing according to established policies. If there is no government policy to promote the use of LED street lights, well, they would incline to be conservative. Perhaps I have gone beyond the scope of the paper. I'm not talking about the work of the EPD alone. Rather, we're talking about the government's overall green procurement policy and how how strong the government is in promoting green procurement so that all government departments can follow. In fact, we have an interdepartmental working group on green procurement covering the Development Bureau and Public Works departments and also the logistics departments. Many procurement exercises are conducted by the logistics department. So the EPD has promulgated a green procurement list to all departments. The Development Bureau has also got a similar guideline for all public works projects. Green procurement should be adopted, and these departments are following the guidelines. Whether it be government departments or internal procurement by the government, I think they have to follow the guidelines. But as I said, it depends on the availability of the products in the market and whether the technology can suit the respective mode of operation. But in general speaking, if the technology is suitable and feasible, government departments are duty-bound to adopt green procurement. But for LED street lights, I think is already a very good test as to how determined the government is. Now, on the mainland, many years ago, they started started the use of LED street lights many years ago, and on the mainland you can see most of the street lighting using LED, and in other countries they have adopted across the board LED public lighting. So I think it is strange that the government is so conservative here. I have taken part in meetings convened by the Innovation Technology Commission on the use of LED street lamps, and yet the government is still rather conservative. However, I'm not criticizing the EPD. I'm sure it is working very hard, but there must be a higher level. There must be higher level efforts to promote green procurement. Mr. Frankie Yik. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to follow up on biodiesel. In fact, in the private sector, biodiesel is being used quite commonly. If the government wants to promote it, I think it should make sure that biodiesel is available even on retail level. Now, diesel, the retail price is $10. But as we all know, if you have an oil card, it's just a few dollars. If you buy biodiesel, you're paying $5 to $6 per liter. I don't know why it is over $10 per liter at retail outlets, given that biodiesel is duty-free in Hong Kong, and companies under my group are using biodiesel, and I see no problem with the use of biodiesel. So the question boils down to how EPG can promote the use of biodiesel so that even if you're not a big customer, a big user, you can still have access to cheap and green biodiesel. Now we are talking about B5 diesel. That means 95% of it is conventional diesel. And I think the prices are comparable, and as regards further promotion, we do agree that the government should take the lead. We should also promote the use of biodiesel to the private sector. I think it takes time to promote the use of biodiesel at a retail level. So we encourage government departments to use it, and public and private organizations, those with their own vehicle fleets in particular, should use biodiesel. And if they provide direct refilling facilities, then they should use biodiesel. I think it is good that we adopt a step-by-step approach, because I think the production of biodiesel from waste cooking oil, according to a study, we're able to produce 17,000 odd liters. In Hong Kong, we may need 17 million liters of conventional diesel. So locally produced biodiesel or B5 diesel may not be able to fully satisfy the demand. Any follow-up, Mr. Yik? Nothing more. Just I want to mention that the EPD will continue to move along this direction. Ms. Elizabeth Quat. Thank you, Chairman. Of course, I support green procurement by the government. Whenever I speak at public works related meetings, are asked about green procurement. And the usual reply is that the government has got a list and also guidelines on green procurement. The question is, the list is not mandatory and green products are not given any priority. I'm pleased to see that the list has been expanded, but can you give priority to green products? Because green products are usually more expensive. So if you always award the contract to the lowest bid, then the bidders will not go for green products. So the list will not be applied at all. So what measures do you have to really promote the use of green products? In fact, over 80% of the procurements have gone for items in our list. And Ms. Quat need not worry. If we believe that there are more than 2 or 3 suppliers in the market, we will make it mandatory. That is, even if the product is expensive, but because there is adequate supply in the market, then the use of the product is mandatory. It will be a mandatory item in our tender documents. But for some items, perhaps the technology is still evolving, or the supply in Hong Kong is still inadequate. And if we make it mandatory, it will create difficulties for the tendering exercise. Now, if prices of a conventional and a green product are comparable, any tenderer that goes for the green product will get a higher score that will increase his chance of success. And for smaller departments, they do not have such specifications. In the tendering process, they may ask for certificates. So in our recent review, we have introduced a simplified green procurement procedures. So if the price is or if the cost is less than $50,000, then departments can procure such products in the market. Are you saying that if the item costs less than $50,000, the government will give priority to a green product? Can you please clarify? In all procurements, regardless of the budget, those on 150 items on the list have certifying requirements. If it is a big contract, of course, there can be lab reports. But if it is just a small contract, the supplier may not do the same due to cost considerations. So if the procurement is of a smaller scale, then they can just go for products with energy efficiency label. So we give flexibility to departments. It depends on the small procurement exercise and the availability of products. We have checked the list on the small procurement list, and we believe that for the majority of them, there are sufficient products available in the market. Whether it be a large-scale procurement or a smaller one, if you give priority, if you specify in your tendering documents, the priority will be given to the contractor who proposes the use of green products, then it will be better and clearer because the tenderer will know. So can you say that green products have enjoyed priority? Yes, we are doing both. In our green procurement notice, we stress that priority consideration must be given to green products. And we also stress that when it comes to tendering and procurement, when you buy green products, what are the steps and procedures and considerations?
First round, any more colleagues? No? Then I'll use my 4 minutes. First of all, I have to thank the Environment Bureau and the EPD for giving us a checklist on green procurement. Here in Hong Kong, we say that we only have recovery but not recycling because it's very difficult to find avenues for sales. Nevertheless, we've seen better results for the eco-pavers. I think the government is duty-bound to take the lead in the market for green procurement. Now you have a checklist here, but when you compare with other jurisdictions, our costs are higher. So for green procurement, local green products or recycled products may not enjoy a competitive edge. So we should give priority to locally recycled products. That's conducive to the whole recycling trade. So will you have this concept or even policy or guidelines to accord priority to local recycled products? Well, there's also this Green Procurement Charter, which started in 2005. In that year, you had 11 members. Now, you have 72 members. Of course, you will say that there has been a several-fold increase. Still, the number is low. Will you encourage more parties concerned to become members of the Charter? Will more government departments procure more green products, particularly giving priority to locally produced recycled products? Well, how to use local recycled products? Just now we heard about biodiesel or recycled oil. As we explained before, if we give priority to locally produced green products, we may be acting against the WTO guidelines. I think we have tried our very best to find a way out. Deputy Director, as the Undersecretary said, as we are a signatory to the procurement agreement under the WTO, so we have to observe the WTO requirements. So we must go by international procurement. If we give priority to local products, we'll be subject to queries. Given that framework, the government has done a great deal of work to support local recycling industries. For biodiesel, glass eco-pavers, from past tendering exercises, we can see that local suppliers did enjoy a competitive edge. Why? Because when we procure biodiesel, we have to rely on a supply chain. Well, 95% of the oil suppliers sell conventional oil, which is still cheaper operationally. But there are other solutions. We may not do it by way of tendering. For biodiesel and waste cooking oil, with government support, we can say, for example, offer land support, and we've been able to encourage recycling locally. Yes, we'll encourage more public and private enterprises to take part in green procurement. Apart from this information portal, we've actually had meetings with public bodies and private enterprises to encourage green procurement. Thank you, Chairman. Second round, Mr. Tony Tse, 2 minutes. Thank you, Chairman. I, of course, understand that in general, green products are weaker in terms of competitiveness in the market, particularly in the initial stage. But as mentioned just now, the government should encourage all sectors of the community to offer support to green products. Still, the government needs a policy. You cannot always offer help to private enterprises. Private enterprises have to boost their own competitiveness in the market. In the choice of green products, will the government consider standardization and objectivity in assessing social benefits? Well, very often we say we need to make good use of public money. You cannot be too unreasonable. So I think you should avoid future trouble. As for this 15 years for green procurement, for private enterprises and the general public, you're not doing enough. You're just talking about 15 years. I hope you can enhance your strength in these plans such that enterprises and the public will make more use of green products. Labeling and certification or accreditation are important to the general public. Well, if the public discovers later that green products are actually not environmentally friendly, they lose confidence, then in future you have to spend a great deal more effort to encourage the public to support green procurement. In the market, the labeling schemes are not clear enough. Are you purely talking about green products? Are these just gimmicks in the market? I think we are rather confused. And the Secretary, I fully agree with you. That's why you see from our paper what standards have to be satisfied. But of course, sometimes people don't read into the details. So I hope our information portal will be helpful. Well, sometimes they may claim themselves to be green products, but that's only a form of publicity. What about accreditation for labels? Well, we encourage the general public to understand what labels are. As the Assistant Director said, for those below 50,000, you should look at the label in a certain way. Dr. Elizabeth Quat, well, the last checklist was produced in the year 2000, and after so many years, you now come up with a second one. We, of course, want to see more green products added to the list. So what will be the frequency of updating this list? Well, we're continuously updating the list. So this will be an ongoing process. When there are new products in the market and supply is adequate, we'll add those products to the list. So you don't need to wait for a few years, right? So the list will be updated continuously. Right. So much for this item. Item 5 on the agenda, any other business? No other business. Finally, I'd like to thank colleagues of government departments, our own colleagues, as well as the staff of the Secretariat for helping us such that we smoothly complete all our regular meetings in this session. So I wish you a happy summer holiday. Meeting adjourned.